Welcome back, everybody. In this Python tutorial, we're going to go over the Folium package. Folium allows you to create web leaflet maps. In this tutorial, we're going to do things just a little bit different. We're going to stay real high level on the explanation of the code because I actually created this tutorial once before and it was well over an hour when I went into great detail on the code, and I wanted to keep this tutorial just a little bit shorter. If you would like separate tutorials on any of the examples that we cover with more detail, just let me know in the comments. Also, I'll make sure that I put this Jupyter notebook on GitHub. That way you can access the code and download the notebook. The link to access this Jupyter notebook on GitHub will be in the tutorial description. In a few of our examples, we will use GeoJSON files and CSV files. Those will be on GitHub as well. If you watch my tutorial on IPyLeaflet, you will already be familiar with a lot of what we will cover in this tutorial. However, note that the functionality and syntax is different between the Folium and IPyLeaflet packages. And in this tutorial, we have a whole bunch more examples than we did in the IPyLeaflet tutorial. Let's go ahead and get started. For install instructions for Folium, you can go to python.org and then go to the Python package index and search for Folium. If you would like to access the Folium documentation, you can access it at this website. The imports that we will be using include Folium, from Folium import plugins, IPyWidgets, geocoder, geopy, numpy, and pandas, and the Vega datasets. For our first map example, probably the most basic way that you can create a map is to use folium.map. So if we run it, you can see we get our basic map. If you'd like to zoom in, you can do that. You can move the map around to different locations. And of course, you can zoom back out. Here we have another example. And in this example, we have added the location, the zoom start, the width, the height, and the control scale. The control scale will add the distance scale here. For the location, that's kind of like your starting location, where you would like the map to be centered, and that is a set of latitude and longitude coordinates. If you would like to change the zoom start, the smaller the number, the more the map will be zoomed out. The larger the number, the more the map will be zoomed in. So here, currently, we're at a zoom level of 12. If we put in a 1, you can see it zooms way out. Now notice on this one, we set the width and the height. However, the map still takes up a large area. Another way that you can resize your map is to use fromBranca.element import figure. Go ahead and create your figure, put in the width and the height. Use the figure variable .addChild and put in the map. Okay, and we're using our map from up here for this example. If you would like to save your map, you can go ahead and create your map, then use that map variable .save. Then go ahead and put in the path, then give the map a name .html. So if we run this, and then we go to our desktop, that's where we save the map, we can actually open that map up. And you can see we get our Folium map, we can move it around, we can zoom in, and we can zoom out. Next, let's go over a few of the different types of maps that you can use. In this case, we're going to use IPyWidgets. So what we've done is we have created a widget, which is the select widget. Then we create a function that will help us show the maps, and then we create an interaction between the widget and the function. So if we run this, we can use our selection box here. This first example that you see is an example of OpenStreetMap. Then we have the terrain. Here we have an example of a toner map. Here we have watercolor, positron, and dark matter. Now notice for the terrain, toner, and watercolor, those are Stamen. And for the positron and dark matter, those are CartoDB. We can also do something very similar without the IPy widgets using layer control. So we go ahead and recreate our map. Then to create our layers, we use folium.rasterlayers.tileLayer. Specify the map type and then add to the map. For the layer control, you use folium.layerControl and add that to the map. So if we run it, you can see we get our map. Our layer control is over here, and then we can just click these radio buttons to see the different types of maps. For this next example, we'll go over how you can create a mini map, a scroll zoom toggle button, and a full screen. So we've gone ahead and created our map. For the mini map, we use plugins.minimap. Then we add that to the map using add child. For the scroll zoom toggler, we use plugins.scrollzoomToggler, add it to the map. And for the full screen, we use plugins.fullscreen, add that to the map. Let's run it. You can see we get our mini map here. Let's actually put this in full screen. Click this button here. And when you move the map around, you'll notice that the mini map changes along with it. Or you can move the mini map and that will change the map here. So these two maps are linked. If you'd like to get out of the full screen, you can just click this button, or you should be able to hit escape. For the scroll zoom toggler, you'll see that down here on the bottom. If you're using a trackpad or a mouse, that will change how that reacts with the map. So currently, if we scroll in, it just scrolls. If you press this button, then it will change and scroll in on the map, okay? So depending on how you have this button set, when you use your mouse or your trackpad, you can either scroll the web page or scroll in and out of the map. Next, if you would like to create a marker that looks like this, you can go ahead and create your map. Here we've used the geocoder module to geocode an address into latitude and longitude coordinates. Then we use folium.marker. We put in our latitude and longitude coordinates. We give a title to the pop-up, a title to the tooltip, and add it to the map. And we run it. And you can see it will place the marker based on the address that was converted to latitude and longitude in the correct location. So that's one way that you can just put one marker on your map. If you'd like to put several markers on your map, there's several different ways that you can do that. In this example, we've used a for loop with iter rows. So here we've gone ahead and created our map. Then we use the for loop to loop over the data frame of the airport locations. And for the airport locations, we use the Vega datasets. We are only using 25 records from the airport's data frame. And this is what the data frame looks like. So we loop over the data frame, then we use Folium marker, then we assign the data to the location and the pop-up. The location will use the latitude and longitude, and the pop-up will use the name, the city, and the state. And we add that to the map. Let's run it. And you can see we have the 25 airports placed onto the map with the markers. And you can click on each marker to get the information. Now, if you did not want to use a loop to place the markers on the map, you can use the apply function. And we have an example of that here. We've gone ahead and created our map. Then we use the airport's data frame.apply. We use a lambda function. And once again, we use Folium marker. We use the latitude and longitude for the location and the name for the pop-up and add that to the map. And you can see we get the same results. If you're using a really large data set, you might want to use the apply instead of the loop. If your data set's not real large, it probably won't matter either way. Next, so in the previous examples, we used a data frame. But let's say that your data set that you want to use to place the markers on the map is a dictionary. You can do that as well. So here we have our dictionary with cities and the corresponding latitudes and longitudes. Go ahead and create our map. Then we use a for loop. We loop over the dictionary. We use items. Then we use folium.marker. And for the locations, we use the index of the dictionary items. So it puts it into a tuple. This would be index 0, this would be index 1. So for the location, we use the latitude and longitude coordinates. The pop-up, we use the name. And then we add that to the map. And you can see we get our map. So we have Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Denver, Chicago, Manhattan. Next, what if you wanted to use custom markers? One way you can do that is to use either Font Awesome or the glyph icon bootstrap. And there are other ways as well. So in this example, we're going to use a Font Awesome custom marker. If you'd like to see examples, you can just do a web search and put in Font Awesome icons. Here we've gone ahead and created our map. We use Folium marker, put in our location, pop-up, and icon. And for the custom marker, we put in Folium.icon, put in the color, the custom type, here, and you can find those, like I mentioned, by doing a search for Font Awesome icons. Now for the prefix, we want to use FA for Font Awesome. Add that to the map, run it, and you get your custom icon. This next example is basically the same. However, in this case, instead of Font Awesome, we're using glyph icon bootstrap. To see examples of those, you can do a web search for glyph icon bootstrap icons. Go ahead and put in your custom marker, and for the prefix, instead of FA, you put glyph icon. And you can see we get our custom glyph icon. Here we have another example with several custom icons. Now to do this, we've gone ahead and created a data frame. The data frame includes the city, the corresponding latitudes and longitudes, and the icon that we want to use. In this case, we're using a loop again. However, we're using iter tuples this time. And this is kind of cool because when you use iter tuples, the output of the tuples looks like this. And then you can just use the I from the for loop and a dot, and you can access any part of the tuple that you want. So to access the cities, you would use I.city. To access the latitudes and the longitudes, you would use I.latitude or I.longitude, and so on. So once again, we use Folium.marker, and we put in the location, the pop-up, and the icon. Now for the custom icons, we use Folium.icon. Then we assign the icon using I.icon. And that will use these icons right here. For the prefix, we use Font Awesome and add it to the map. And you can see we get all of our custom icons. Now one quick note, when I went to the Font Awesome icon webpage, not all of the icons that I wanted to use worked. So you might have to try out some of the icons and see which ones will work for you. Another common thing that you might like to do is to place markers on your map and enumerate them, or to put numbers inside the markers. And those numbers would correspond to your locations. So once again, we've created a data frame. The data frame looks like this. We have our cities, coordinates, and the icons that we want to assign to each city. And there's all different kinds of ways that you could use this. So for example, let's say you have some cities with some populations, and you wanted the numbers to correspond to those populations. In this case, we're assigning the numbers going from the west coast to the east coast. So here we have our data frame that we're going to use. We create our map. Once again, we're using a for loop, iterating over the data frame using iter tuples. We use Folium marker, assign the location, pop-up, icons. And for this one, we're using the plugins.beautify icon. Then we assign the number, border color, border width, text color, and then here we have some styling. We add that to the map and run it. And you can see we have our enumerated icons. You can also place circle markers onto your map. There are two types of circle markers we'll use in this example. So the green marker that you see here uses a radius in meters. The blue and yellow marker we have here is a circle of fixed size with a radius specified in pixels. Now one thing you'll notice when we zoom in, this circle stays the same size, and this circle gets bigger. Okay? And that's because the green circle is specified with the radius in meters. So that will correspond to the zoom level. This circle here is specified in pixels, and that should stay the same size no matter the zoom level. So it just depends on what type of circle you'd like to create. Next, we have an example of how you could plot a route. We've gone ahead and created our map. Here we have our route latitudes and longitudes. And to create the route, we use folium.polyline. We put in our coordinates and we add that to the map. So you run it and you can see we have our route going from the west coast to the east coast. And each stop along the way are the cities: Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Denver, Chicago, Manhattan. You can do something very similar with an ant path. And to create the ant path, we use plugins.antpath. If we run that, you can see that it's similar. However, you'll notice that it is animated, and it's actually going in the direction that we wanted it to go, from west to east. Next, we have an example of how you can overlay a GeoJSON layer. A few notes on that. You can use a link or a file. In this case, we're going to use a file. And normally we put our files on the desktop. However, in this case, this is a local file in my home directory. Another note, to create these GeoJSON layers, you can go to geojson.io. Then you can use a draw tool to create the shapes, and then save it as a GeoJSON file. Also, you can actually use Folium to do this, and we'll show you an example of that below. And last, if you have some shape files that you would like to use, you can convert those to GeoJSON using the QGIS application. Okay, so we've gone ahead and created our map. Then we use folium.geojson. We put in the file name, we give it a name, and that will allow us to access it in our layer control here, and we add that to the map. For the layer control, we use this code here. Let's run it. And you can see our GeoJSON layer has been added to the map. And you can take the layer off like that and put it back on. Next, here we have an example using subgroups with several GeoJSON layers. Here we've created our map. To create your main group, you use folium.featureGroup. Then you can reference your map variable .addChild and pass in your main feature group. For your subgroups, you can use plugins.featureGroup subgroup, and we have created 3 subgroups here. Here we've gone ahead and pulled in our GeoJSON layers and added them to the map. And then here we have created our layer control. Now in this case, the layer control is not collapsed. You can see that's set to false. And then we can control how we want to add the layers. So to take them all off, you click here. If you just want to see a certain layer, then you can click on one of those checkboxes, or any combination. Next, we have an example of a choropleth map. Now a note on this, there are many more examples of how to create choropleth maps in the Folium documentation. So if you'd like to create choropleth maps, be sure to check out those examples. In this example, we've gone ahead and imported JSON. Then we pull in 2 files. One is the GeoJSON file that has the coordinates for the shapes, and the other one is a data file. And the 2 files have to correspond with a data element. In this case, it will be the county. And the data file will have the information that will correspond to the colors for the choropleth map. So here we have our GeoJSON counties. We've gone ahead and added an element to that GeoJSON file to make sure that there's an element in common between the GeoJSON file and the data file. And as I mentioned, that's the county name. Then we go ahead and we create our map. Then we create our choropleth. We put in all the arguments and add it to the map. In this case, we've added the layer control, and then we use the map variable to display the map. Let's go ahead and run it. And you can see we get our choropleth map. Up here we have the color bar, which corresponds to the colors for the map. The lighter the color, the lower the population for that county. The darker the color, the higher the population. And this might be one of the examples that I'll try to do a separate tutorial on and go into more detail on the code. However, as we mentioned, don't forget there's very good examples in the documentation as well. Next, in this example, we'll go over how to create a heat map that looks like this. So the first thing we want to do is to get some location data for large cities that we want to put onto our map. These are the cities that we're going to use, and we're going to use the geocoder module with OpenStreetMap. So this will give us the location information. Then, to get the latitude and longitude, we just use these variables, and we use .lat for latitude and .long for longitude. So for all of these cities, in each of the lists, we have the latitude and longitude, and then we have the population that will correspond to the intensity of the dot on the map. Now notice that we've gone ahead and taken all of the populations and divided them by 1,000. And that will make the intensity dot, or the bubbles, just a little bit smaller so it fits better onto the map. Then we've taken all of these variables here and put them into one list. So we end up with the latitude and longitude and the intensity. And that's what we need to create the heat map. Then we go ahead and recreate the map. We use plugins.heatmap, put in the cities with the coordinates and the intensity, and add it to the map. And here we have our heat map. Now, you can also create an animated heat map to show different data over time. So here we've gone ahead and created our data. Here we've created a time series that will correspond to how the data changes over time. Then we go ahead and create our map. To create the heat map with time, we use plugins.heatmap with time. We pass in our data and our date times. Then we use our variable, heatmapTime plugin, and add it to the map. Let's run it. Now, to see this, all we have to do is press play. And you can see the data changing over time. And the time changes here. You can also zoom in, and you can speed it up. It's pretty cool. Another cool thing you can do is you can add a latitude and longitude tool to your map, and this will allow you to click anywhere on the map and get the coordinates for that point. And all you have to do for that is to create your map, use the map variable .addChild, and pass in folium.latitude longitude popup. Let's run it, and you can see when you click, you get the latitude and longitude for that point. Moving on. If you would like to create a measure control for your map, then you can use plugins.measureControl. And you can see here we have our measure control. Then we can click on create a new measurement. Let's go from the west coast to the east coast. And finish. And you can see from this point to this point, it's approximately 2,584 miles. Now one thing to note, when I tried this in a Google Colab notebook, these two arguments here did not work. So you might have to take those out if it doesn't work. And also note that if you'd like to change your units, you can do that here. Okay, moving on. If you'd like to create a dual map, you can do that by using plugins.dualmap. Then for each of your maps, use folium.tilelayer. Put in your map and add it to the map. In this case, we've gone ahead and added the layer control that you see here. Next, in this example, we're going to show you how you can add draw tools to your map. So go ahead and create your map. For the draw tools, use plugins.draw. Add those draw tools to your map and run it. You can create lines. Here we have a polygon. Here's a square, a circle, markers, and small circles. If you'd like to change those, click here on Edit Layers. Then you can change them as needed and click Save. Now this export is what we were talking about earlier. So you can create shapes and export those as GeoJSON layers and then use those for layers on future maps. So on a Mac, if you click export, it will download it. And you can see that it's gone to the downloads folder here. I'm not exactly sure where this would download on a PC, but I'm pretty sure that it will work pretty much the same. If you would like to delete everything, you can click on the trash can and then clear all. Here we have an example of overlaying an image onto your map. So we've gone ahead and created our map. Then we use folium.rasterlayers image overlay. We put in the name of the image file. We put in our bounds. And this is the important part here of trying to get the image placed correctly onto your map. And what you do, you have to put in the latitude minimum and the longitude minimum. Then you put in the latitude max and the longitude max. So we've put in those coordinates here, and our image includes the flags of Africa. And you can see that this overlay, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. So if we use the layer control, we can take that off, and then we can put it back. Here we've assigned an opacity of 0.5, so it's a little bit see-through. So you can see the flags for each country. Next, another cool thing you can do is that you can put charts into your marker pop-ups. We're going to go ahead and use the Seattle weather dataset from the Vega datasets. Now here we've used Altair to go ahead and create a chart. And the chart looks like this. And what we want to do is to take this chart with the Seattle weather data and place it onto the map for the Seattle area. And then when we click the marker, we want this chart to pop up. So here we have our chart element, then we have our map, here we have our marker, then we create a pop-up, we add the chart to the pop-up, then we add the pop-up to the marker, and finally we add the marker to the map. So let's run it. And you can see the marker is placed on Seattle, and when we click this, we'll get our chart with the Seattle weather data. Pretty cool. Next, you can also use Folium with IPy widgets, and we showed a little example of that earlier. Now for this example, we've gone ahead and created a widget with a text box. Here we've gone ahead and created our function, which will allow us to put in an address, then get the coordinates for that address, and place a marker onto the map. So we have our widget, our function, and then we have our interaction between the widget and the function. So let's go ahead and run this. And let's use a few of our test addresses here. For this first address, we'll use the Indy 500 track. Let's go ahead and put that in and run it. We get our map with the marker placed right on the Indy 500 track. Let's go ahead and zoom in. And you can see here we have the Indy 500 track. Let's try another example. For this example, let's try the San Diego Zoo. Let's run it and zoom in. And we get our marker right by the San Diego Zoo. Now for our last example, this is the address for the Apple campus, but let's say that you don't want to use the full address. Let's just say you want to use the zip code. You can do that as well. Run it. And here the marker will be placed at the 95014 zip code. Let's go over one more example. Once again, we're going to go ahead and use IPy widgets. In this case, we've gone ahead and created two widgets, and these are two text boxes. And what we want to do is to plot a route. So here we have our widgets, and here we have our function, and here we have our interaction between the widgets and the function. Let's run the code. And let's plot a route from the Indy 500 track to the San Diego Zoo. Now we've also added some functionality in this example that will allow us to see the distance from the start location to the stop location in miles. Let's run it. So you can see we have our ant path with the animation going from the Indy 500 track to the San Diego Zoo. And the approximate straight line distance is 1,784 miles. Okay, that's all we have for this tutorial. Join us again next time.